Good morning, everyone, and welcome to EAPM's Creating People Advantage webinar. And thank you for joining us today from all across Europe and maybe around the world. I'm Ulrik Brix. I'm CEO of the Danish HR Association, NOCA, and also EAPM board lead on Survey and Insights. And together with Kai, who leads our Survey and Insights working group, we've been strengthening the CPA study year after year to create even more value for Europe's HR and people communities. And this year, participation from the National Association has been higher than ever. So let's see all the associations that have contributed to this. So on behalf of Kai, myself, EAPM, the full CPA steering committee, warm thank for you engaging and collaboration and making this survey the biggest and most, you can say, a full survey we ever seen. And if you want, as a local HR professional, even more country-specific insights, you're always welcome to reach out to the local national associations on the screen, because they're partnering up with BCG locally. And I think it's the best way to get even closer and more key questions that can shape your national context and the way you engage with people professionally locally. So before we move into the next part, a few words about today's format. As you can see, we want really you to engage. So this session is designed to be highly interactive. You will experience a rhythm, and it's the same rhythm. So we will have presentations from BCG. Then we will put the panel on. I will show you later, and also integrate your questions into the session. So please put your questions into the Q&A. You can upvote them if you want and like them, so we can see what is most interesting to explore. And then we just dive in all the insights we're going to be presenting today. So, but before we walk through the agenda, let me just very briefly introduce our amazing speakers, because we have strong representations today from BCG. We got two CPOs, and one of them also representing the World Federation and the European Association. And then we also got a professor. So academia is also present in the room. And they will guide us to maybe the most important HR trend report ever. So let's look at the program, because the program is like into different sections. We will start with a welcome, where Berne and Jens will do the formal welcome. Next, we will have global insights by Philip from BCG. He will also dive into the key insights from Europe. But between every presentations, we will have the panel on to make sure that the insights is really explored by practitioners and you guys. And after that, we will have two deep dives. The first one is into Gen AI. I think everyone is interested in learning about that. And then we dive into one of the more like nerdy areas, skills-led AI, where Jens from BCG will unfold what is really trending right now. And finally, in the end, we will have a short, not really a panel, because we have the panel all the time, but we'll have some high-level perspectives on what we as HR professionals and leaders are to take into consideration, moving from the trends here into our own daily way of working with HR, AI, and other trends. So what to take into consideration moving ahead. Of course, slides and materials will be shared with you afterwards, and you also have an opportunity to engage with locally. The CPA study is connected locally with the national associations and the BCG local teams. And so now, finally, we start. I'm pleased to hand over to Berne and Jens that will do the introduction of the CPA study and the collaboration behind it. Thank you so much for joining in. See you later.
Thank you, Ulrik, and a very warm welcome on behalf of EAPM and World Federation of People Management Associations as well. Well, every year, this moment is always a meaningful one for me. It's been almost 10 years that we conduct CPA study together. But my excitement is not only because of the report itself, but it is more about the community behind it. CPA study reflects the collective insight of thousands of HR professionals across Europe and globally. Their experiences, their challenges, their progress, and their ambitions for the future. So, before anything else, I'd like to sincerely thank all of you, the national associations, your volunteers, your members, your leaders, and the many HR professionals who make this work possible every year. EAPM and World Federation exist to strengthen the HR profession across borders. So, by doing so, each country has deep local expertise, of course, but no single market can fully capture how work, technology, skills, and people strategies are evolving globally. That is exactly why our partnership with BCG is so valuable. Together, we bring a perspective that is both regional and global. It helps us connect the dots, challenge assumptions, and strengthen the work of every national association. As we explore today's findings, I'd like to encourage all of us to look beyond our own countries as well, because this is a unique opportunity not only to understand where Europe stands, but also to reflect on what we can learn from the rest of the world and from each other. Today is about shared learning, honest comparison, and collective ambition. So thank you to everyone who contributed, and I am looking forward to dive into data. But before that, Jens.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you also from the BCG perspective. Thanks for participating, to the ones who have participated in their survey. I think talking about people priorities is absolutely crucial. We are living in uncertain times. There are new technologies, there are geopolitical challenges that we are facing, and at the center are people. And the function who is really managing people is next to the leaders is the HR function or people function. So therefore, to understand really what are the global trends, where to focus on, I think is absolutely crucial. And the Creating People Advantage study is one of the most holistic study in the world when it comes to people priorities across the world. And I think it's a unique cooperation between the EAPM, the WFPMA, and BCG, where we really put together the great network that you have, the methodologies of assessing those trends and bringing it together into a study that is hopefully compelling and hopefully helpful for your daily work in the HR area. If you look back at the CPA, it has been a journey. It's a 10th edition now. We launched the first survey together in 2009. It was a European one, and since then we have jointly created 10 studies, and it's really interesting to see really how have the topic emerged and what have been the trends over time. But I think let's get into the details, yeah, and let's really share what were the outcomes out of the study.
Cool. Thanks, Jens. So let me take over and show you and guide you a little bit through the overall kind of global research as a first step. So as Ulrich also said in the beginning, it's the largest CPA study we ever conducted with over 7,000 participants all across the globe, with a very large participation from Europe, covering various industries, various hierarchy positions, and also partly HR and non-HR participations. Yeah? So in the essence, this study really is a great pool of data and information to shed some light on the priorities of the HR function going forward. And we basically always ask two major questions. So there are some deep dives, as you saw in the agenda, but the major questions is about what of the HR topics are the most important for the future, and what are your current capabilities along those areas. And we asked these questions along 28 topics that all kind of need to be addressed by HR professionals. But the idea is really to start the discussion about prioritization. What is really the most relevant for your respective industry, for the respective region, but naturally in the end for your respective company. And let me start with a first perspective. And the data is very dense. So I explained you a little bit what you see here. So you see on the left the 28 topics. And they are ranked by the survey rating of how important or somewhat important they are in the future. So you see the list is kind of led by people and HR strategy as being the most important topic, really not by far, but really significantly there. You see also on the right what was the ranking the year before. So the beauty of the CPA is also that we always have some kind of a comparison to the previous years. So naturally, there is some involvement of topics. That's why you find one NA also here, because some topics are added or slightly merged from previous version. But overall, there's a huge comparability over the years. And if we look a little bit at the picture, there are a few overarching kind of elements I want to kind of pinpoint. So if you look at these 28 topics overall, there is a very kind of close ranking between, let's say, rank 20 and the first ones, which is also something that we see since years, that it seems to be hard to really differentiate what are the most important topics, because it feels everything is important. And to a certain extent, that's right, because you need to address all those 28, but still to make a step forward and really kind of make a step change in some of these topics, we strongly believe you need to somehow focus on those selected ones that are the most important for you. One aspect on what changed. So we see, which from our perspective is a good sign, that digital solutions, so investing in the backbone of HR IT infrastructure, really jumped in importance. But we still see some other technological, especially Gen AI, rather being in the mid-level of the future rankings. So that's a little bit the overall perspective. On the bottom end, we find a few that decreased in importance around diversity and around sustainability, which is most probably tied to the overall kind of geopolitical situation. If we now flip the side and look at the capabilities, the picture is a little bit more nuanced. So you still have the same 28 topics on the left. They are now ranked by the self-assessed capabilities of the respondents. And you see, if you look at the top, there is quite a lot of continuity. So in the top 8, most of them are more or less on the same level as the year before, except for recruiting and onboarding, where we saw really a step up in ranking in terms of capabilities. And if we reflect a little bit on in the last 2 years since the last edition, the talent scarcity was really one topic that kind of challenged many HR departments. So it's to a certain extent natural that many HR departments really invested in this muscle to really build up capabilities here. Beyond the rest, we see, I think, some shifts up and down, but that's really kind of in terms of the capabilities, the biggest change. If we look rather at the bottom end, and that's I'm a little bit already kind of pre-concluding on the solution on some of the call outs, we really see a lot of the digital elements. And the bottom is with deployment on Gen AI, one of, I think, the most impactful technologies also for HR, but for entire organizations, where HR departments really seem to not have the capabilities yet as you might need them. If we combine these two elements and basically put them on a matrix, so you have the future important in the y-axis, you have the current capability in the x-axis, it gives you kind of more or less 3 zones. So those topics that are not so important but you are good is rather green. So it's the idea, just keep on doing as you did. For those that somehow are in the middle in the yellow zone, it's probably reflecting on your very specific requirements. Take those where you need to invest. And then there's this red zone where we would say that's the topics that are highly important and your current capabilities are rather low. So that's what we would say are those areas with the highest urgency to act. And if we kind of look at those, there are 8 topics up in this top corner, and probably kind of putting the focus really on these 8 topics up there. It basically comes out there are 2 major elements of topic clusters. The one is really digital and AI. So really deployment of Gen AI on digital solutions, HR, IT architecture, and also the people analytics piece. So that are topics from a global perspective are in this area of highest urgencies to act where we really need to invest. The second part is, and it contains some evergreens like strategic workforce planning to really make up your mind about the workforce of the future. And the strategic workforce planning topic, I said it's an evergreen because in the first edition in 2008, it was already in the red zone. So the importance of some of these topics are kind of not stopped, but also, as you see, the capabilities did not have probably the same evolution as the importance over that way. So the second is really around strategic workforce planning, talent management, leadership, and upskilling, reskilling. What is probably a little bit beyond this topic perspective, what we still see also as a request to many HR departments, that you need to put them in focus to really deliver value. So what these topics really deliver for the company. And here again, the study has some interesting inputs or outcomes. So we asked also kind of beyond the 28 topics, a few KPIs. And we asked about the attrition rate of the companies. And what we see, those companies that have high capabilities in employee engagement, recruiting, and sustainability, that's the yellow, lighter green ones, compared to those that self-report a lower capabilities, really have significant lower turnover rate. And the same is true also in the time to fill. So if we asked again, what is the time to fill in these respective companies, we see a huge significant difference between those companies that have high capabilities in strategic workforce planning, having kind of Gen AI already deployed and have kind of a shared service center to deliver. Those companies have significant lower time to fill than others. That's a first, I know, very brief and very condensed perspective on the global results, but happy to now reflect a little bit with the panel on what that means before we move to European data.
Thank you so much, Philip. And the first question is obvious, as I think many of us in HR seen that we are moving closer to business. But I'm so curious to ask the panel about where do you think the biggest gaps still are between our ambition to be close to business and create real business value and impact, and making that happen. So where's the difference? Where's the gap? What to focus on? Alice, will you take the lead here?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Alice here from Novonesis. Happy to start. I think there's probably kind of 2 things going on here. I think historically, HR has been very much about transactional work, classical transactional work. And that means if you look throughout Europe and you look not just in the big cities, but you look in rural areas, small companies, you'll find that that's probably what we have created reputation and created impact about. So I think this shift about all of a sudden really understanding the business and making the connection between what is it that I do in terms of, for instance, talent management or recruitment or performance review that then will trigger an increased performance in the business overall. I think making that connection is still something that we need to practice more. And I think we as HR professionals need to work much harder with that, involving the business so that we can come into a stronger partnership around that. So I think that's the first one. Then I think the second thing, we're always busy. There's almost so much on the agenda. And to make that leap, you do need to invest time and take time out to really kind of, okay, let's make this a focus area. And with the long list that was just shown, it kind of tends to drop off. Those are my 2 perspectives on that.
Thank you so much, Alice.
Can I just chip into that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because I mean, what Alice said was really very much spot on. And while I was reviewing these two slides that Philip just shared, it is exactly what HR needs to do, isn't it? I mean, to show the interaction and the link between the people results and business results. And I think what should get strengthened is exactly what Philip did for HR. I mean, we need to show this relation. We need to prove this relation more often. And I also think that maybe HR is a bit too diplomatic still. And we have this traditional habit of being diplomatic, being the mediator, not mudding the water most of the time. But I think at the age of AI, HR needs to be more braver, forthcoming, and assertive, even at the expense of being perceived a bit pushy. But I think we need to prove and also defend this human and business results relation and how undeniable it is. So that's one of the gaps that I spot time to time.
Thank you so much, Berna. And just setting it right, there's multiple presidents in the room. There is Alice, who is the president of NOCA, and then we of course have the president of EAPM. Berna also to sitting the right. I think that was maybe the title was misplaced in the beginning. But we also have a professor present, and I think Berna's perspective is diving into behavioral aspect, cultural aspect, maybe psychological aspects. Brian, anything that comes to mind in why we show still lacking of, well, understanding the gap between making real impact and value and our self-perception?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think I very much echo the previous points, which is that HR is more of a taker versus taking the opportunity to be a maker. And I think part of that links to the evidence. So this survey is brilliant in that it brings all this evidence together. But what we find is in terms of perception of top management and stakeholders, in terms of the value of HR, the more HR can evidence what they're doing, the impact, the business case, the value add, the more they gain credibility and trust with top management, and that begins a narrative and a conversation. So in some ways, there's a little bit of the status quo and trying to think about, well, how do we expand the potential, the opportunity, and the evidence of the positive benefit that we can make? And I think there's still a gap in that space too, yeah.
There's a reflection from, thank you so much, Brian, from that perspective, but also maybe a reflection of this in the Q&A. Julia mentioned that it's interesting that transformation, which supposedly must contain something about change management, is rather low in the ranking. So if that is so important for us to master the change management processes, why is this that low? Any thoughts about reflection that could be to all in the panel? Why do we see that?
Maybe I can start.
Can I start chipping in just?
Shall I?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, well, I mean, not exactly only about the change management, but change management is a leadership capability, isn't it? And it's a behavioral thing as well. So why it is ranked low? I was just looking through the details of the presentation, and what I see was in the importance, leadership development ranked as second. Am I right, Philip? So please feel free to correct me if I'm making a mistake on this one. But on the capabilities, yeah, well, on the capabilities side, when HR ranked the capabilities, have you noticed where the leadership development is ranked? It is 14th place. So I think those kind of leadership behaviors from the realization of the materiality and importance of that leadership behavior to the development of that leadership behavior and the practice of this leadership behavior, there is a skill gap. And I think that this is one of the reasons why it is ranked, change management ranked lower than it should have been. That's my take on.
Other reflections from the panel on that or Julia's question?
If I may, then just chip in on that. I agree with your perspective, Bernard, but then I also think so my company just went through 2 years of integration, major integration, and people are fed up with change. So I don't think necessarily we're not good at change management. We're just lacking levers, and we're lacking new ways of doing it, because the standard channels, whether that's town hall, manager talking, etc., they just feel worn out because people have such a level of change fatigue. So I think it's less about the capabilities. Actually, I think that's perception, but I think it's more about how do we deal with this with the workforce who is so tired of it, and what are new ways of doing it, and can we keep inventing those?
Thank you so much.
And if I may add,
yeah, of course.
What you also see is a very operational reason, and it also is a similar one to the topic of being close to the business. Is really the HR function very often is overwhelmed with a number of tasks, very operational, sometimes even administrative tasks, and I think really having the capacity, the focus to step back to think about how can we drive change in an organization quite often is it cannot be pursued because it's just a lack of time and capacity. So therefore, I think really, and we come to Gen AI in a second, so really leveraging new technologies to free up capacity, in the relevant HR or people management, people roles, I think will enable the HR function going forward to get closer to the business, but also to focus more on highly important topics like change management, leadership, etc. Just taking out the admin burden.
But that requires us all to be more, you could say, risk willing and
Yes.
create a setting that allows both our leaders or HR professionals to experiment. And I know that, of course, many of the theorists talks about creating an environment that allows failure with success, if that makes sense, but creating an environment that is allowed to experiment. So what separates these organization leaders and HR professionals that are willing to do experiments? Any thoughts about that? Maybe Brian, you have like a perspective from psychology or behavior. That what are we looking for in order to make sure that we are more experimenting?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important, and it is that psychological safety piece whereby you're encouraged, enabled, and in some ways rewarded for taking innovative or creative behaviors. So that has to come from leadership. That has to be a cultural phenomenon. You can't tell someone to go and try and do something. It has to be embedded in the system. So I think, and we'll get to AI a little bit, but a part of this is the experimentation, the prototyping, the pre-mortems, the learning, the reflection, and making that a process of how we do something. So look, it's okay to come back and say, I tried something, this is what we attempted, this is why it didn't work, these are the learnings, and let's take them over here. So it becomes part of a system or a culture. I think often you have very good individuals who'll go away and experiment, and sometimes the organization doesn't recognize their experimentation. So I think it's a cultural question from my perspective.
Any of that thoughts on that? We are about to move into the next, more closer to your perspective, but any closing remarks? BCG, panel? Okay, then back to you, Philip, and get us closer to what's happened in Europe.
Thanks, Ulrich. So let's move in or zoom into Europe. As said, we have over 2,000 answers across Europe. Europe is naturally a very diverse continent with many of great national associations that contributed heavily. So again, we have a very broad split of industry that's a little bit different than the global one, as by nature of different industries across the continents. And the kind of the overall split of seniorities is very much comparable. There are also 12 countries where we have a further deep dive, and I think the respective national associations, we are currently planning also for some detailed outlines for those to have a deep dive on the countries, because we have so many feedback, so many responses there that we can have statistically significant kind of deep dive in those. So probably here again, a deep thank you to all the contributing national associations in Europe to make Europe really one of the biggest contributor to this study. If we look into the details, it's again the same logic of the slide I showed you from the global results. You again see the 28 topic on the left. They are now ranked by the ranking within the EAPM and Europe. So up and down, and you don't have the comparison now to the previous years here, but rather a comparison towards the global rankings. Naturally, it's interesting to see a little bit where European-based companies at least see some differences in the importance. So let me pick out a few that I found very, very promising. So there is the first one where the topic around people analytics is reporting is really significantly higher ranked in Europe compared to the global ranking. So one of these digital topics that we have seen in the red zone kind of overall seems, at least on the importance scale, even higher on the list in Europe than on the global ranking. I think there is, and the same applies also to HR IT architecture. So in Europe, it seems to be even more aware of the digital kind of relevance that is there for HR than in the rest of the organizations. I was a little bit surprised that some of the other kind of major shifts are ranked a little bit lower around rather the cultural pieces in terms of the importance. But overall, I think the deviations are also not too major. What is even more interesting from my perspective is the differentiation in the capabilities. So again, the same logic, you have the capabilities, the topics ranked by the current capabilities of Europe compared to the globe. And if you look at the top 5, 6, 7, there is not much change. So the self kind of perspective of HR departments, what they can do very well compared what they do not so very well, is very comparable. And that applies not only for the top capabilities, so that ranks 1 to 7, but that also applies to the bottom ones. So also for Europe, the capabilities around AI and HRIT, digital solutions, is on the bottom end. So whereas Europe kind of ranks those topics even higher importance, their capabilities are not necessarily higher here than in the rest of the world. Some additional kind of major differences is around sustainability and ESG. I think that's a little bit politically driven, where just also from European legislation, this topic, especially also in the last years, was very prominent with all the reporting regulation, where I think, again, European companies just needed to invest to build their muscle around this topic, where we see this is much more pronounced in the capabilities than compared to other countries out there. So that's two of the major kind of differences in Europe. We will share kind of the major data and differences across the countries in the send out we will have. But I think for the reflection, I would probably stop it here to have a little bit of reflection. Also, I think from the panels that know European even better in the European HR departments compared probably to the global expectations and the global trends. So may I hand it over for you to reflect on the differences above what I already started.
Thank you so much, Philip. So it seems like Europe is a bit strong on structure and maybe a bit cautious to move into AI. That is maybe not that surprising, but what is really holding us back? Because when we look at the priorities, they are very high on analytics and AI and implementation of that. So I really want to explore maybe from a cultural perspective or behavioral perspective, Brian, what is holding us back in Europe? Why are we not like moving as fast as Asia and US are doing in these areas?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting question. And I mean, I think it's a broader question in the world at the moment. What does it mean to be European? But because some of the things that you would claim they're holding us back, others would put forward and say, look, we're very careful in terms of AI, in terms of the regulation, which have brought a lot of benefits. So I think we have to be careful with the sort of assertions, and particularly around ESG and sustainability, where we're ranking very high from the European perspective. I do think, and I've looked across the 10 years of the 10 surveys over the years, and like leadership comes up as a prominent theme in leadership development. And I think really when we're looking at, we have to take agency, particularly this moment in time with the world that's around us, and we can blame sort of external factors, but ultimately, for me, I think leadership behavior is really, really critical. And that just doesn't mean top management. It means when we're initiating change, and Alice talked about change cynicism, etc. It's middle managers, those critical part of the organization that are actually involved in the implementation of change. When it comes to HR, it's line managers. Are we enabling our line managers? Do they understand the desires of what HR is trying to achieve? And I think another part of the European question as well is, we should acknowledge, is the diversity. Okay, we can look at industry, but also 99.7% of firms in Europe are small firms, 60% of employment, 40% of value add. And if you scan across the surveys, there is a very distinct emphasis in terms of where their strengths are, which is in culture, rewards, but less so in terms of the area of diversity and inclusion, sustainability. Large firms tend to be very strong in terms of people analytics, so that evidence, bringing the evidence to the table. Small firms are a lot weaker. And finally, I think what Philip mentioned there was really, really significant. Despite these things we have, the survey sort of emphasizes challenges with respect to value proposition and culturing enablement. And that for me is really, really interesting, because it suggests that there might be European strengths. We might be doing things really well in HR terms and organizations, but they aren't reflecting our perception of what our value proposition, why someone would want to work for us. And I think bringing that narrative together is really, really important, because certainly we have capabilities, areas we want to double down on, but then that has to reflect who we are as the organization and who we want to be and why someone would want to join us. And based on the results, there seems to be a disconnect between those two.
Thank you so much, Brian. I would love to hear Berna and Alice's perspective. Berna, what do you think about this? Is reflecting your thoughts on what Brian just put in here, or do you have another perspective on this?
Thank you. I think I would echo Brian. Indeed, I was self-criticizing, double-checking myself, because I don't want to be perceived as a broken record, talking about leadership and leadership and leadership. But at the end of the day, it boils down to one pen, isn't it? And it's leadership. So Europe is not weak on intent. I think Europe is quite strong, as you said, on structure, governance, and responsible thinking. Those are the parts that Europe could be proud of. But on the other hand, we suffer from the lack of speed on many items, many issues. And I see the reason of this is being the leaders want certainty before movement. And regulations really matters. It is important, of course, but too often in Europe, we use regulation as the explanation of the delays. So we are slow in decision-making processes, and maybe, and it's a personal thought, by the way, maybe too much consensus seeking time to time. And also about the execution, we take steps back too often, losing time. So I see a bit of a low execution courage in Europe. But
and maybe that could be Alice's clue word, because I don't think I know another CPO that are able to turn her own HR organization into a very, very strong execution. I wouldn't say machine, because it's organic what you do, Alice. So your perspective on why we are lagging back, or are we lagging back here?
No, so thanks, Ulrik. I think there's a difference between executing within HR in an organization where you've got the mandate and you've got the playing field to do what you need to do. And I think there, my experience is that we tend to run fast, and we tend to do what we need to do. for me, I think Europe and the European Union is a double-edged sword here, because on one hand, and my company is a listed company, the number of governance and reporting requirement that Europe is putting on, not just the company, but also the P&O, the HR function, is incredible. And I think that is what is partly slowing down. On the other hand, GDPR, Gender Pay Directive, those are also things that are pushing the digital journey and the digital progress that we need, because we cannot go into 26 or maybe 27 with Gender Pay Directive without having a digital solution. Otherwise, we'll be swamped with requests. So I think it's kind of this double-edged sword around. Yes, the European Union is putting some pressure on that. Then, from my perspective, is actually pushing the digital solutions here. On the other hand, governance reporting requirement is slowing us down incredibly. So I'm saying what Bernard's saying in the same way. I think what we can do is within our own sphere, within our own command of control, is to execute as much as we can and as fast as we can.
But is there maybe also some cultural thing maybe that aims into the question? It's an anonymous one in the Q&A, but how can it be explained that well-being as a part has decreased in importance, in fact, when AI is calling so many roles into questions, and people are afraid and worried about their own job and security. So there's something in stake here. Something is about Europe. Something is maybe about our culture and personality. I don't know. So is this interlinked, or is it just a coincidence in your perspective?
But sorry. So bring number of neurodivergent diagnoses coming out, number of stress cases. If you put all this together, I think that's a very strong trigger or catalyst for well-being being more in focus in companies. So I'm just saying the world is a more tense place to be in and to work in. And I think that's impacting us in the workplace when answering this, but it's also impacting our full lives.
Thank you. Jens and Philip, you're working with a lot of DDHR organizations that have like a need to set both AI transformation, but also well-being and all the, you can say, more softer parts of HR on the agenda. How do you see they are handling and navigating in these prioritizations?
So what we do is a couple of things that come to my mind here, right? When we talk about Gen AI or new technologies in general, we apply typically the 70-20-10 rule, right? So 70% really of this transformation is about people. Yeah, 20% is about tools and 10% about data. Yeah, and quite often companies focus very much on the technical side of things, and therefore, I think it's important to really keep an eye on the, let's say, on the people dimension of that change. And well-being for me is one key element in here. I know in the survey it hasn't been ranked as high as we would have had it expected, to be honest, right? It was a surprise for Philip, myself, and the team, right? One explanation for me personally would be maybe some of the respondents think, after COVID, yeah, we have invested so much into well-being, making sure, that we find the right balance between, remote work, on-site work, etc. So that there's this feeling, yes, we are managing that topic. If you would ask me going forward, I think this whole well-being topic will increase in importance significantly. I mean, you mentioned it, right? The perception that, some jobs might be, I don't know, threatened. Others need to reskill significantly due to new technologies, etc. So therefore, this whole topic of pressure that is felt or perceived by employees, I think probably could increase. Let's put it this way, and it will increase.
So looking ahead, what kind of people capabilities and competencies do we need to prioritize in order to stay competitive? Because as I hear you, it's not only speed and application of AI, it's also other things we need to take in consideration to keep up with the culture and the behavior we need in our organization. So we really love to have your inputs on that. So I don't know, maybe CBOs first. You are like trying to do this every day in your organization. So any thoughts about that? Alice, will you go first?
Yeah, I'll go. I think it's a fact, and I think we're a little bit delayed in AI, but I think it is a fact that many jobs will be supported. Let's put it like this: not necessarily replaced, but will be supported by AI. So for me, it's more the abilities to contextualize and have those collaboration conversations that then are triggered by the data you get. So, doing a due diligence, you can put it into machine learning now and it will spit out the data quickly. But then what do you do with it? How do you put it into play? I think those are the skills. So I think the contextualization and the individual thinking from data are skill sets that we need, and we'll need them across most jobs. So the data gathering, the analytics work, that will definitely go down in terms of need, but it's then what to do with it. I think that's there where we need to really focus. And then I still think the collaboration, stakeholder management, those things are going to remain critical in organizations. So looking outside your own sphere and your own role, but then what I do, how does that impact others? And am I aligned with those other people? So I think with a bit of an AI angle, but then also just a general angle, those were the things that I would highlight.
Thank you so much, Alice. Berna, any reflections on that? You are also in an organization that are international and global.
Thank you. Well, Alice's list is really good one, I think. And I might maybe add on top of that, there are many, many things that we need to learn every day. And as Alice said, sometimes we learn them and we don't know how to use them. But also, I think we are struggling with the fact that how to learn them. So I would also invest learning capabilities of people and how to learn, what to learn. And I think they call it as strategic learning capabilities at the moment. So how to learn and what to learn are really two very crucial questions, not only for the people who are working in working life, but I mean, as a parent, those are two very important questions in parenting as well now. So the skill sets are changing every day. So what you need to keep up with is to keep your learning capacity on a certain level and explore yourself on your learning capabilities. How do you learn and how you make it better is one of the things that I think people need to focus on if they want to keep up.
So this almost sounds like a question for the professor, I think. So how to do that? Brian, any good? And we also have like an echo on that in Q&A. So dialectic thinking, how do we do that? Develop that in our organizations, more complex thinking.
Yeah, look, I think the ability of learning how to learn is a fundamental one. And I think there's a few different strands to it. So there's a terminology sometimes we say about HR that there's never a program that HR doesn't like. We had an additive mindset. Well, I think a lot of the time, actually, we should be thinking what not to do as much as what to do, and that prioritization piece. I think with learning as well, sometimes it's unlearning as much as learning. So discussing the undiscussables, and I think that's always an interesting question to ask of organizations. So is it productivity? Is it underperformance? Is it the lack of creativity, innovation? Because you can target learning towards where you need learning most, I suppose, and you need to sort of know what your key challenges are. So I think sort of enabling and obviously empowerment. And one thing about this survey, obviously, is its managerial focus, but ultimately, where the ultimate learning happens, if I can say ultimately 3 times in a row, is the front face of the organization. It's those frontline employees that are interacting with end users or with the product on a day-to-day basis who are experiencing the HR, and it's about capturing those insights and bringing them into the conversation, which serves 2 purposes: buy-in, in terms of people are involved in the strategy conversation, and also then engagement and knowledge sharing in the sense that you have their ideas. And I think finally, one thing that's going to challenge the learning, and we'll come back to this, is the role of AI and what happens to tacit knowledge and entry-level jobs. So I think there's a lot of big questions, and it's a very significant point, I think, of what learning how to learn actually looks like. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Connecting back to behavior, stakeholder management, as Berna and Alice also commented on. So Jens, I know you were about to say something, but maybe you can take that into also the next part of our webinar, where we're looking more deep diving into the Gen AI, as everyone is like, I think, looking for to understand.
I agree,
So,
Ulrich.
yes.
We mentioned it so often. Let's deep dive into it, right? And we have one statement here. AI enables HR to move from reactive service to strategic foresight. And I think it is a technology, but it's really, from our perspective and also as a result of the study, really a game-changing technology that can change the role of HR. It can change the positioning of HR, but it can also free up the capacity that is needed to really focus on those important topics that we have been discussing throughout the first part of that webinar. What we did in the survey, if we go to the next slide, we asked a couple of questions to really understand, what's the situation of Gen AI in the different organizations. And what you can see here on the left-hand side is really the question, what is the relevance of Gen AI in your organization? Left-hand side, the European results compared to the global results. And overall, the difference between global and European is not that different. What you can see is that Gen AI is one of the absolutely key topics. It's roughly 40% of all respondents said, yes, super important. Yeah, we need to work on that one. So it's really on the agenda. On the flip side, there is like 60% of respondents say, we are not there yet. It's not that important. So they don't see really the benefit yet. And we also did a distinguishing in the study between the company size, right, of respondent, and we saw significant differences between the company size when it comes to the relevance of Gen AI. So on the next question, if you say, Gen AI is important for us, where have you really implemented it? Yeah, and how have you adopted it across the organization? Most companies are still at a stage where they say, yes, we have implemented, but we have implemented it not across everything. It's more like in very selected areas, we are more like testing Gen AI applications. Yeah, more than half of the respondents, 54%, said it has been implemented in selected functions or pilots, right? So it's really in a piloting stage. Being actively used across the organization, is every fifth respondent says, Gen AI has been really, let's say, anchored across the organization, and some others are still experimenting. And I would say the super minority is saying, we have not yet started, but we are interested. It's more like this wait and see strategy. But what's hindering, let's say, the HR function to really take off and really leverage all the benefits that can be achieved using that new technology? We are talking about people. It's sensitive data. We are in Europe, right? And the concern around data privacy is actually hindering every second respondent of saying that's one of our biggest concerns when it comes to Gen AI. If we apply new applications, what are the implications around data privacy? The other one, and I think that links quite nicely to your question, Ulrich, right? What are skills that need to be being built up in an organization? It's really the lack of internal expertise, right? I think if you would summarize, most organizations are aware, yes, Gen AI is a huge opportunity. We need to go into that one, but there's a lack of expertise, how to do it really, how to approach it, and how to scale it across the organization. Obviously, there's also the topic of budget constraints, 40% of respondents, which is higher compared to the global average. But I would say those are the three major concerns when it comes to Gen AI. Privacy, data privacy, expertise, and budget. No? Maybe let's go deeper one more step. Yeah? If you look at Gen AI, where is it used for? And the majority, like 2/3 of our response, said it's used for automating routine content creation. Yeah, so it's really more, let's say, on the more basic routine activities. It's used with a strong focus to support employee productivity. Similar result, 2/3, right? So it's really more like repetitive task, where you can increase productivity by applying a new technology. Followed, the next topic is generating new ideas, creative content, and I think that's also what we also see in our personal lives. Picture generation, slogans, formulation of emails, etc., or maybe even marketing approaches. That's really where Gen AI is also used. If you go to the bottom, and I think that's also interesting, right? Is the strengthening of knowledge capture, GenAI is not used that much. So you could also use it really to capture, all the knowledge that is in an organization and really, make sure that you collaborate, that information is exchanged, that experiences are exchanged. But that's not really the use case that is quite present yet in organizations. When it comes to the HR areas where GenAI is really being used, and I think this is a bit different maybe to some other studies that we've seen. Number one is really chatbot, employee self-service. Yeah, so really setting up bots, answering employees' questions or managerial questions. Yeah, and to automate that and to again linking back to the left-hand side to create productivity improvements. The next activity within HR where GenAI plays a major role is on this whole topic of sourcing, candidate matching. Yeah, starting from screening CVs, matching employees to specific open positions, etc. Where it's not that prominent, it's on performance review summarization, and here we are below the global average. Could be that this is also driven by this data security, which is quite strictly regulated in the European Union. When it comes to personalized learning pathways, like 1/4 of respondents are experimenting in that way, and also on the workforce planning forecast, GenAI is, I would say, it's gaining increasing importance, but we are below the world standard. So if you make a big step back, I would summarize GenAI is an absolutely hot topic. Most organizations are thinking about it. Nearly everybody says it's important. The question is how you deal with it, whether you pilot it in one area to test it, whether you already roll it out across the organization, or whether you are more in this wait and see position, varies obviously by organization. There's a strong focus on productivity, on routine tasks yet, and linking to that one within HR, also those activities are right now the primary focus when it comes to GenAI.
Thank you so much, Jens. It seems to me like HR is taking some of the low-hanging fruits, utilizing chatbots and areas like that, but really not trying to scale Gen AI into their organizations, into their processes, into their thinking, and I would, of course, curious about you as CPOs, Bernard and Alice. Why do you think this doesn't flow in organizations as we would expect? This still on the very primitive stage in many organizations. And Bernard, will you go first on this one?
I'll try. Well, because on Gen AI, there's a lot of dust over there, isn't it? It's like a, big cloud that everybody is trying to find their way. Nobody wants to be left behind, but on the other hand, we don't know where to get and how to get. So lots of confusion. So just like, about the regulations, there is this AI fatigue as well. Every day you're asking yourself the question that, am I not learning something that I need to learn? Am I not doing something that I need to do? So I think every company, every institution is thinking like that. I see it in two aspects. One is individual support in how you live your life and how you work. It can be improved by AI. And the second one is the enterprise applications of AI. So they are intertwined, by the way. So for the enterprise one, it is a business transformation. It is not like, to choose one or two AI tools and apply it into your, adapt those into your business practices, but it is a complete transformation of the model. So probably you're going to ask, what I see as a lacking part is most of the time AI is addressed to one or two people or a department in an organization, while it is a collective issue that you need to cooperate to be on the same page and you need to set a strategy together. So I see that AI is sometimes being taken a bit too simple, maybe. So I think the success on the enterprise part lies in being on the same page, setting the right strategy, then be brave enough to go through your business model and roles and responsibilities and capabilities, and then, apply an action. Again, with my reservations about the being AI fatigue. So the second thing is the individual, and I think organizations have to support their employees about that individual part as well, because without learning how to use AI in your life, not only during the work but also for the other purposes, again, this transformation is lagging, at least at one part. So we have some responsibility to support employees and to see it as a whole transformation rather than only something that you could apply and use in your work. So I started the discussion with this.
Thank you so much. And Alice, I would love to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I like your cloud analogy there, Bern. I think that's a good one. Then build on a few of those points, then bring some other points to the table. So I think for instance, in my company we have Copilot. I don't think a lot of employees know how to fully use it. They don't know how to fully use the functionalities in Teams, summaries and things like that. So I think there's a responsibility from the businesses to actually teach basic, learning or basic usage of those tools. And I think that's coming back to your previous answer, Bernard, that's a responsibility we have. Your question was why we're not scaling. I think there are a couple of things. If you're working across Europe, there are many, let's call it classical employee handbooks. There are many rules, there are many policies. To really fully digitalize them and scale that up AI-wise, you need to streamline them. They need to be crisp, clear, accurate. Before you have that, you can't really go into scalability. So I think that's one thing. But I also think historically, if I may, the two biggest vendors of HRIS systems, Workday and SuccessFactors, SAP, they have been slow. They have been very slow in their structures they have. They've been sort of more of classical enterprise systems. And only in the last, let's call it 6 to 12 months, are we seeing them buying entrepreneurial companies that have products that can bolt on to Workday or to SuccessFactors and thereby create speed for HR to then work differently. And I think there's something is happening in that field there that will help us taking more leaps into different AI solutions that are in various functions of HR. But I think that is only happening now. So we've been a little bit constrained by what is it we have if you want to have one system, one point of contact, because they haven't been able to actually deliver that level of speed or call it AI product and thinking. So I think those are the things that are primarily holding us back.
Thank you so much. And Brian, I was just wondering, is there some sort of psychological or behavioral aspects here we lack on focusing on? Because I know that technology providers should push us even more, and we can do much more aligning our internal processes and practices. But what is the barriers mentally for us to move into this? Because they're probably there, I guess.
Yeah, if I can quote Edge from a famous Irish band, U2, he talks about the other AI, which is actual intelligence. And I think sort of the people dimension is sometimes where we're lacking, because a lot of this is considered, and particularly from vendors and some of the fads and fashions and buzzwords, as a technological deployment. And actually, it's the potential, or should feed into a discussion about ways of working and ways of being in organizations. So I think there's a lot of people and HR, jumping on the AI train, but we don't necessarily know the destination. And I think I was talking to a CHRO recently, actually, and he goes, I don't discuss AI in my organization. I talk about technological disruption generally, of which AI is one part, because we're only focusing on one dimension. What about quantum computing? What about VR, XR? So there's probably a need for a little bit of a balanced conversation. And I think it raises loads of interesting questions. So I've seen organizations like Moderna, for example, they've combined, the digital responsibility with the HR responsibility at one person doing it. We've organizations having cross-functional disrupt teams. But I think really importantly is that AI literacy, awareness, ethics, but also fear. And I think when we're thinking about, and you look at best practice cases of introduction, how it's scaled up, you're looking at the pain points. You know, where can you make someone's job that little bit easier? So if you're looking at introducing it, and BCG has a report around frontline service workers, it's real-time feedback, which is making my job easier for me to perform. So if you can bring me in and show me actually, okay, there's a benefit to it, and then I have more time to focus on the high value add part of the role, I'm more likely perhaps to engage. And I think one thing I find, and I find this in education, you know, we're talking a lot about student assessment and how we have to learn how to assess students, etc. But we're not talking sufficiently about how we're using AI. And if we're not leading by example and doing by example and having clear sort of transparency, and transparency and expectations is part of AI literacy, how can we expect others to? So I think understanding what excellence looks like, what effective behavior looks like, taking that effective behavior, scaling it up, creating a playbook around it, communicating it, but in the context of what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's the strategy piece. And as a final point, I saw a paper yesterday from Harvard, and they talked about trend slopping. And this is AI picking up buzzwords and fashions versus actually doubling down on strategic choices. So there's a caution there that actually they put all these strategic options into 11 different programs, and they all came out with the same recommendations. So as much as we might think it's fostering creative thinking, maybe it's not. And maybe there's a standardization in the models. In addition to, if I put in CEO, it's going to give me an image of a male in a suit. So the biases that are in the system and the biases that exist out there will be replicated and reinforced through our system. So, sorry, very long-winded there, but I think AI, there's so many points to consider. There's definitely a lot of
yeah. But you step into where's delivering value, what kind of examples we are to look at. So I really want to invite everyone in here. So what are the really credible value pieces of you applying Gen AI in organizations, maybe across them, maybe in HR. So CPO, BCG, but what kind of like examples do you see that really are making an impact here?
Ulrike,
Do you want to? Yes, yes, go ahead.
Let me give you a provocative answer, right? I would even twist the question around, right? And I would say, I mean, if you look at the employee journeys, and if you really take a more radical perspective, I think probably all employee journeys can be automated. Yeah, in the past there was this discussion about, you know, where can we automate, where do we find a system, you know, to make things more productive, etc. I think going forward the discussion will be the opposite. It will be more like theoretically or practically everything can be automated more or less, right? It's more like where do we want to have that human touch? Where do we want to really make sure that we interact, you know, on a personal basis to really make a difference and differentiate ourselves? So, and I think that will be the discussion of the future. So it's less like historically, you know, do we have a good tool or a good application we can plug in? Yeah, it's the opposite. Just to have a bit bit provocative.
Thank you so much for being a bit provocative about that. But have you your hands raised, Alice? I can't see it.
It wasn't, but it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I mean, almost all the success stories are about how we get rid of the routine, mundane work. So the successful AI applications so far were about removing those burdens from humans' shoulders. And I can't say that I see a direct impact on the business model, but I know, for example, one of the companies that I work for, it is a fast fashion company, and they changed their business model, part of their marketing model completely. And I'm sorry to say that, but they cut the marketing agency from the loop. And now a very well-trained AI delivering all the outcomes that has been provided by the marketing agency, almost all. So this is a successful AI application, I think. But I still think that the cloud is too big, and we need a bit of a time to understand where we really add value. And speed is important, but also not to go blind is important for me.
Thank you. And as you just made one of the biggest mergers in Denmark. So I wonder how do you see that? Can you utilize that knowledge into to also applying in Gen AI or to create even more value, or is there other reflection you want to share?
Yeah, if you look outside the HR area, I think there are many things. I think M&A due diligence. I think there are many areas where that would be a super important tool. Also logistics, transportation, all those things, and they are using them. But I think they're still doing that. And if you look at your survey, Jens, for instance, we're an R&D based company. That is where we use Gen AI most. Is actually mapping the strains and the molecules, and that goes so much faster now than it did in the past. So we're seeing that. But if I kind of pull it home, I love your provocation, Jens, and I agree with you. I honestly think learning, coaching, onboarding, all of those things you can do fully AI-led, fully. I think it's the perception from the candidate or the employee is like, hey, where's that person I want to talk to? But over time, that can add the same amount of value as if it was led with an employee or with a person. So I like your question, and that's the question we should ask ourselves, because I think there are many places we can use. Just one last thing, I think and back to your point, Bernard, when we do have, call it our employee books, our handbooks, our policies, performance, when that is all in there, we have an agent to help us answer those questions. I think it's a dual tool. It's a tool where employees and leaders can get questions answered, but it's also a tool where we as HR professionals can learn, because my business partners, they don't know the legislation of the European countries. By having those tools, they will pick them up quite quickly, and they can then quickly have a good, impactful conversation with the business leaders. So I think it's not just for the employees and the leaders to use, it's actually also a learning tool if you are working more internationally in HR yourself. So I think there are many ways where you can do that.
Thank you. Any concluding remarks, Philip, Jens, about that?
No, I think let's move on to the last chapter before we kind of have a full review.
Yeah, because again, this is about our skills, I guess. So the last dive in is about the skill-led organization. So Jens, give us some insights on what's happened on that.
Yeah. And allow me maybe just one comment on the Gen AI topic, maybe one last one. I think looking at the HR function, I think the HR function is really crucial for this Gen AI transformation because it has a dual role, right? On the one side, obviously, there are plenty of applications by Gen AI within HR to drive it, make it more effective, more customer-centric, etc. On the other hand, I think this is really the driving engine for the overall Gen AI transformation in the company, right? Making sure you get the right skills, that you get the right talents, etc. Right? So therefore, skills, skills are the new currency of growth. That's one statement that you can read quite often, and we wanted to investigate in the latest Creating People Advantage study really what is the perspective of the participants on this whole topic of skill-led organizations, and we ask, what does a skill-led organization mean to your organization? I think it sounds like a buzzword. So we really wanted to understand what's behind it and what's the perception. What are really companies thinking when they hear skill-led organization? And what you can see here on the left-hand side are the results, right? So like roughly 1/4 of the respondents said it's, if our work is organized around skills and tasks. And I think that's pretty obvious, right? I mean, making sure that you have the right skills for the right tasks. If you look at the next one is for like 20%, like 1/5 of the respondents, it means, people, our employees are matched to projects based on their abilities and not roles. And I think this even goes one step further, right? To really look at, what are the individual skill sets of employees and how do they match to the specific requirements of projects. What you also see in the study, and here we are a little bit below the worldwide average. On the previous topic, Europe is actually above the worldwide average. Is employees build and apply skills beyond their current roles. This means employees are not being just trained for the task or the role they're currently performing, but you are building up tasks and you are building up skills to enable the employees to become more flexible in the organization to get a much wider skill set. What we see on the lower end, without going through all the details of the result, is 7% that it's just a buzzword, right? I mean, there's nothing behind, not relevant for me. And what is fairly low is really this hiring based on skills. So what would that mean is that, if you look for like a new employee, you're not prescribing, that somebody needs to have a specific, I don't know, university degree or a specific work experience. You would rather say, let's look at the individual, try to test and find out what type of skills he or she has, and then making sure that we find the right job in an organization. And this one is something that is not yet very advanced. If you look at the right-hand side, which use cases do we see, and which have been proved most impactful when applying the skill-led approach? So what are the things really where you can generate value if you take a much more, skill perspective in doing things? It's number one is really this matching of, employees to specific roles and projects. So really looking at individual skill profiles, making sure that those profiles match to the requirements of the project or the specific roles. Where it's also very relevant is, and I think we should underline the word targeted here, targeted up and reskilling programs to really make sure, okay, what are really the skill gaps? And we talked a lot about skill gaps in today's discussion. What are really the skills gaps that need to be addressed by specific up and reskilling programs? Internal mobility and career progression, that's also something where skills take an increasingly important role. Like 43% of all respondents said this is something where we really take on like a skills perspective. And when it comes to employee engagement and retention, skills also really matter. On the lower part, and I think that's in line with the left-hand side, reduction of the hiring costs. So really having like a skill-led hiring approach is something that is not yet that prominent, at least not in Europe, but also not worldwide. If you go to the next slide, what are the challenges actually? When organizations try to implement like a skill-led organization. And number one challenge is the difficulty in assessing really, and I would add maybe the word identifying skills accurately to really make sure how can I really capture what type of skills my employee have, right? And to be in a position to use this insights and to get a better matching to roles, to projects, etc. What's also a big challenge, and that's what we also see in our daily work, working for a number of companies, is really quite often a lack of unified skills framework or taxonomy. So that you really have this, let's say, skill DNA implemented in your organization that enables you to go into a skill-led organization. And very linked to that one is low data quality or analytics capabilities, so that this information is just not present or not captured in a way that it can be analyzed appropriately. You have this topic of resistance from managers or employees, to very openly or make their skills, specific individual skills, transparent, and then some other factors that are hindering some organizations to go in that direction. So overall, I would say skills matter. Skills are important, and I think whether it's really a skill-led organization, fully fledged end-to-end across all employee journeys, that's something probably not too many organizations have yet implemented. But for specific activities, for specific journeys, I think skills really are a currency of growth, and they really matter and will be taken into consideration across Europe.
Thank you so much, Jens. One of the things come to mind when we do this presentation is also that being around in HR for more than 20 years, first working with competency-based organizations, now working with skill-based organizations, it doesn't really tend to fly in organizations. These frameworks are like conceptually great, and we all understand why they're important, but when it hits like managerial level, the managers levels and the employee levels, they tend to break. And I just wonder, what is that all about? And maybe you as a professor in psychology and behavior, Brian, can give us some insights on what seems to be a perfect way to lead an organization. Doesn't always fly, and we don't adapt to that. So what happens?
Yeah, well, look, I don't think anyone's going to deny the significance of skills. First off, I think that's really important. It puts the emphasis on people. It puts the emphasis on a future focus. The sad academic in me sort of thinks about the definition piece and how organizations are actually defining it, and if there's clarity, consensus around what we're trying to achieve. And I know that sounds very basic, but where I've seen organizations try to implement skills, they're not sure themselves what they're actually trying to achieve. So I think it's a basic starting point. I do think if you take the old job description of old, and how many people would actually know what was in their job description, or what they do in their daily tasks reflects their job description. There's a mismatch there. So I think this idea of deconstructing jobs into tasks and skills is useful. It enables stretch and growth. It enables plug and play around different projects. It enables conversations around where you and the organization want to grow. It begins a conversation around succession, not as a meeting, as a sort of system. So we're thinking about the whole organization and the talent pipeline. And I think the skills agenda also brings a few important things. Accessibility. That's where it sort of emerged in the US. In talent scarcity, are we not creating enough opportunities for those that don't have traditional education qualifications, or for those who are returning to work after a long period, who mightn't have the required technical on paper, but actually can demonstrate that they've developed experience and a skill set that's relevant to the business. In the context of inverted populations, this is going to be more and more important, because we won't have enough workers for our future demands. So finding ways to integrate people and multi-generationals and multi-skill sets into the organizations important. To the AI piece, I think this idea of transversal skills and the idea that fundamental sort of critical thinking, collaborative ability, cross-cultural competence, they're really, really significant in terms of developing. And I think finally, as a focus on skills, and back to an earlier question around how to learn, I know Siemens years ago used to send out potential managers on learning expeditions to local startups. So where are you getting the knowledge that's at the forefront, and how are you developing your skill set, I think is a really interesting question. We can talk about growth talks about where you want to be in the future. And linked to something that Siemens are doing at the moment is this idea of a zero customer, where you introduce the technology internally first before you try and present it externally focusing. So that embeds that learning and that knowledge. And finally, with them, the idea of employment responsibility residing with the employer and the employee. So your employability is part of your responsibility. So you provide people with an infrastructure, facilitated conversations, and different pathways by which they can develop and stretch themselves in different roles and develop skill sets. So the EU is obviously pushing this quite a lot as well with their Union of Skills. So I think in principle, it's really important, but it's not surprising to see how many organizations are struggling with what it actually is and how it actually delivers value.
Thank you so much, Brian. Alice and Berna. Alice, do you want to give your perspective on this?
Yeah, thanks for letting me go first. Berna, you can. No, I think, and I think I'm probably the oldest person in the panel here, so I can say this. So I think skills is just it's the same wine in a new bottle compared to when we talked about competency models. And I'm old enough to have gone through a couple of these globally, and they were a headache, they were a pain, because the moment you had developed them, they became obsolete. And so what I think is, that was too big a machinery. And so I think the whole conversation around skills, a little bit like Gen AI, is been triggered by AI and the threatening of jobs. And what does that require? But it's also being put on the table because of the change, the speed that is necessary for companies and for HR functions to work under and deliver under. So for me, I understand why we're not grasping skills, because for me, it's still a little bit, what are we really talking about here? Is it behavior? Is it competencies? What is it? And to really, and I love the questions you have in the survey, Jens and Philip, but to really deliver on those, you need to change your internal systems. We have Mercer, we have job architectures, we have, promotions linked to all of that. So just pulling people out, I love your thought, Brian, but to just pull people out and do that in a company of, let's say, 10,000, 50,000, that requires a different structure. And then we come back to your hobby horse now, Bernard, leadership, because I don't think leadership is about skill. It's about culture and behavior and the mindset of adapting to what do I actually need, and do I dare take just people out of that organizational structure, put them on projects or give them opportunities. So I think we're looking at a kind of fairly big conundrum here about things we think we should be doing, how are leaders, able to actually deliver on those, and what about our internal structures and way we still, reward and promote people. And so I think there's a bigger thing going on here that we need to deconstruct, bit by bit to really make this work.
Thank you so much. Time is running. Berna, a quick reflection on this as well. I know it's a big topic, but
I'll be very quick because I think Brian and Alice said almost all. And I agree with that. All these competency models became obsolete the day that you start to, put them in effect. I've been there, so I saw all of those. Maybe I could just say something about the future orientation. I think we are going through to a point that skills, your skills are the things that will differentiate you from AI and the rest of the people in your organization. Sooner or later, our roles have to work around our skills. I don't think that they are like that at the moment, not 100%, but we are going towards that direction because AI and technology is doing everything else. So if you have differentiating skills, then your roles will reflect those skills at the end. So, and I understand that we have all these rigid structures, and it's really difficult when you have 10,000s of people in an organization. It is easy to say change. If you want to change, it's fun. If somebody is telling you to change, it's pain. So, but I think we're gonna have to face that pain quite soon. So.
Thank you so much. We are about to end, but before we go away, I really want to have like a 10, 15, 20 seconds pitch on what is the most important thing we as HR professional and leaders must have in our mind when we look at the trends, when we look at the way HR is moving for the next 12, 14, 16 months. So let's do a quick round, 10 seconds. Brian, can you be brief?
That's tough. I think drive the agenda rather than driving the agenda, co-create it.
Thank you so much. Philip, do we have a perspective on that?
I think there is. We talked a lot about Gen AI and probably also the threat of HR automating all of the processes. But I rather see it could be a golden era of HR going forward. But there is so much to be done to unlock the 70% that Jens said, which is nobody is taking care of that. And if HR departments find a way to address those parts, they really will have an impact.
Long 10 seconds. Thank you, Philip. Berna, you already started upon like looking into the future. Any closing thoughts on that?
I will not say invest in leadership anymore, but invest in leadership. But other than that, prioritize a few strategic skills that will define your future and also your organization's future. Then try to turn those into measurable business impacts. It would be my one sentence.
Thank you. Jens, do you have like a
very short one?
Yeah.
Get focused and set the right priorities going forward.
As the consultant speaking. Thank you so much. Alice, will have the last word in the panel.
I'm leading to Brian's step where he says you need to paint the picture for your employees, your HR employees, what the future looks like, and then you need to take their hand and bring them there.
Thank you so much for all of you to elaborating on the survey, giving us some insights. We are about to close, and I know Maurice is starting to put on our information. We have an upcoming webinar. It's almost International HR Day, the 12th of May. We hope that many of you join us on that day. And I also know that we really want to have some feedback so we can improve for the future. So she will send on the survey. She will put it on right now. You can scan the QR code or you can just jump on slider.com, give it your feedback. It will take 10, 12 seconds. And during you finalizing the input here so we can improve for the future, I really want to thank all of our speakers from BCG, Alice from Novo Nordisk, Berna, from, of course, the World Federation, the European Association, and Brian also pitching in with an academic perspective from University of Ireland. So thank you so much. Thank you for all of you putting in good questions there. We didn't manage to answer all of them, but we tried. We hope to see you all again next time, International HR Day, and keep us in your mind, because you're the ones really fulfilling the fantasy of EAPM. You are giving it real value. You're using the insights, you're giving us perspectives, and you're giving us feedback. So I hope you had some insights, perspectives you can use in your organization. The material will follow shortly, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining in, and have a fantastic day.